I am 63 years old, and if you asked me what about me has never changed, I would tell you this. I have never truly slept deeply. Not once. My wife used to joke that I did not sleep at all, that I simply lay still and waited for bad news to arrive. She always laughed when she said it. She was never wrong. That night was a dry, cold November night. My neighborhood sits on the quieter side of Raleigh, one of those streets where the oak trees are older than half the houses, and everybody knows who is coming home just by the sound of the tires. By midnight, every porch light was off. The wind moved across the yards with that papery little sound dead leaves make when they scrape across concrete. Everything was ordinary. Ordinary enough to make you forget that disaster rarely announces itself. My phone buzzed at 12:04 a.m. Not rang. Buzzed. That was enough. I opened my eyes on the first vibration, reached over to the nightstand, and looked at the screen. Dominic, my oldest son. He never called that late. Dominic was the kind of man who lived as if he had been assembled by clockwork. Precise. Disciplined. Predictable in the best and worst ways. He sent birthday messages 2 days early in case the actual day got busy. He checked on me at 7 in the morning. He still mailed Christmas cards with handwriting inside them. After everything that had happened to him, I sometimes thought routine was the rope he used to keep himself from falling apart. I answered immediately. "Dom?" His voice came through low and flat. "Don't say anything. Just listen. Turn off every light in the house. Don't touch your laptop. Don't touch the Wi-Fi. Go up to the attic right now. Lock the door behind you." I sat up in bed. "What are you talking about? It's after midnight." "Dad!" Just that one word, and my spine went cold. I had heard Dominic use that tone exactly twice in my life. Once when he told me his mother's cancer was no longer treatable. Once when he looked at me through the glass in visitation and said, "I didn't do it." "I'm listening," I said. There were a few seconds of silence. I could hear him breathing. Then he said, slower this time, "Go to the attic right now, and Dad, don't let Ethan know." The room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ethan, my son-in-law, my youngest daughter, Lily's husband, the man who had been sleeping in my guest room for the past 4 nights. He had told me their condo in Charlotte was having plumbing work done, said a hotel would be inconvenient, said he had meetings in Raleigh anyway, so staying with me made more sense for a few days. It sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. I had believed him. I had grilled the ribs he liked. I had opened the bourbon I had been saving, for no good reason except that my wife used to accuse me of saving things forever, and then acting surprised when life ran out first. "Dominic," I said quietly, my throat gone dry. "You're scaring me." "Good," he said, and for the first time in the call, I heard a crack in his voice. "You need to be scared. You need to stay quiet. And you need to move now." I did not ask another question. By my age, you learn something. There are moments when asking questions only slows you down. And when the calmest child in your family speaks to you like that, you listen. I got out of bed and moved through the dark like a thief inside my own home. Down the hallway, past the family photo from Wrightsville Beach when Lily was 16, past the stitched sign my wife had hung by the linen closet that still read, "Home is where the heart finds its way back." When she was alive, I thought it was corny. After she died, I stopped looking at it for too long. I pulled down the folding attic stairs as quietly as I could, climbed up, pulled them shut, and locked the latch from the inside. The attic smelled like old wood, paper, and the dust of clothes nobody wears anymore. I sat down on a cardboard box with my wife's handwriting across the top. "Winter things do not throw away," and I tried to remember how to breathe. Our attic was one of those unfinished places that always belonged more to plans than reality. My wife had once wanted to turn it into a reading room. A soft chair by the round window, white shelves, a low lamp. She had clipped pictures out of magazines and pasted them into a notebook, saying that when things calmed down, she would finally have a place to sit and read in the afternoons. Things never calmed down. Then she died, and the attic stayed what it had always been. A place to put the things a family could not bring itself to get rid of. I had not been up there in more than a year. There was a narrow crack between two floorboards near the east wall. It had appeared after a leak 2 summers earlier. The roof got fixed, but the boards never settled quite right again. I bent down and, more from instinct than intention, pressed my eye to the gap. The guest room below was dark. For 1 second, I thought Dominic had lost his mind. Then the lamp switched on. Ethan stood in the center of the room, wearing a white t-shirt and slacks, looking like a man burdened by absolutely nothing. He was handsome in that polished, careful way, the kind of handsome that seemed curated more than lived in. He worked in finance, or at least that was how he explained it at parties. Funds, restructuring, growth strategy. Every time he spoke, I always got the impression he was using 30 words to cover up something fundamentally simple. He moved to the corner of the room where an old armchair sat, one that had belonged to my mother-in-law years ago. He did not hesitate. He did not test anything. He slid it aside cleanly, like a man who had done it before. Beneath it, the hardwood floor looked exactly like the rest of the room. But Ethan knelt, placed 2 fingers near the baseboard, and pressed. A panel popped up. Underneath it was a floor safe. I froze. I had lived in that house for 26 years. I had redone the kitchen floor with my own hands, fixed the garage door, replaced every lock after my wife got spooked one winter by a stranger walking too slowly past the back fence. I knew every groan in the walls, every bad outlet, every loose brick on the back step. I did not know that safe existed. Ethan spun the dial quickly. Left, right, left. Click! He had it open in less than 20 seconds. Then he pulled out a thick stack of papers, bound with a rubber band, sat down on the edge of the bed beneath the lamp, and opened it. I could not read everything from that angle, but I saw enough to feel my stomach drop. The document on top looked official. Dense text, signatures at the bottom, and the title across the top read, Last Will and Testament, Eleanor May Carter. I stopped breathing. That was my wife's full name. Of course, my wife had a will. We made it together 12 years earlier, after her second round of treatment scared her into planning for the worst. I had sat beside her in a law office on Glenwood Avenue, while she signed each page in a hand that trembled just slightly. That will had been used after she died. Everything had already been settled years ago. Split between me, Dominic, and Lily, with a smaller amount set aside for Nora, Lily's best friend, whom my wife had loved like a daughter. I had a copy downstairs in my filing cabinet. Green folder. Labeled in my wife's handwriting. Important. So what exactly was Ethan holding? He turned the pages, stopped, then pulled out his phone, and began taking photographs one by one, calm as a man finishing some loose administrative task, instead of handling the hidden secrets of the dead. My heart pounded so loudly I was afraid he might hear it. Dominic had not said, "Be careful." He had said, "Don't let Ethan know." Not warning, confirmation. He knew exactly what this was. I leaned back against the wall in the dark and did the thing older men do when they are frightened out of their minds. I started adding up the past. 8 years earlier, Dominic went to prison for federal financial fraud. The case had moved too fast, too clean. Evidence had arrived from nowhere. Transactions, shell accounts, a paper trail that looked airtight. His court-appointed lawyer had urged him to plead out for a lighter sentence. Dominic refused. He kept saying the shape of the whole case was wrong. But systems do not care much about shape. They care about paperwork. He spent 22 months in federal prison. When he came out, he was quieter, slower, more deliberate. A few years later, he took a job in federal financial investigations. Back then, I thought he was just trying to turn pain into purpose. But that night, sitting in the attic filled with dust and old winter coats, watching my son-in-law photograph a will that should not have existed, I began to understand something else. Maybe Dominic had not chosen that life to forget. Maybe he had chosen it to remember. The lamp downstairs clicked off. I did not move for the next 4 hours. Morning in our neighborhood does not arrive through light. It arrives through sound. A neighbor's porch light shutting off. The first bird getting loud for no reason. The smell of the air changing. The sky outside the small, round attic window fading from black to slate gray. My knees ached. My back felt like rusted metal. I had been sitting on that box from midnight until almost 5, without daring to shift much at all. My phone buzzed once. A text from Dominic. "You still up there?" I texted back. Where else would I be? 3 dots. Gone. Then back. "Come out the side door. Keep the lights off." He's still here. Dominic's grey SUV was parked 2 houses down under the largest oak on the street. No official plates. No engine running. It looked like the sort of vehicle any middle-aged man might use to drive kids to soccer practice. I crossed the backyard in slippers, shoulders hunched against the cold, opened the passenger side door, and climbed in. Dominic sat behind the wheel in dark clothes, with the kind of stubble that comes from not caring what your face looks like for 2 straight days. He was 38, but that morning he looked 45. Some faces age because of time, some age because of truth. My son belonged to the second category. I sat down and shut the door. Then I looked at him for a long moment. "I made ribs for him," I said. Dominic blinked. "What? 4 days ago. I made ribs for him. Opened the good bourbon, too." I turned to look at my son. "If you had told me sooner, I'd have fed him canned soup." Something flickered across Dominic's face. Not quite a smile. More like the memory of one. "I know. How long have you known?" He stared straight through the windshield. "About the safe? 11 months. The answer sent a colder feeling through me than the morning air. "Start talking," I said. And he did, for 40 minutes, steady and clear, as if he had rehearsed that morning in his mind for years. It began, like the ugliest things often do, with money. My wife's estate had not been the kind of estate people fight over in movies. Just the house, an insurance payout, the savings she had built through a lifetime of clipping coupons and refusing to buy anything at full price, and a small investment account she had opened for Lily back in college. Altogether, a little over $400,000. Not enough to change the world, but enough to tempt greed. The original will divided everything equally between me, Dominic, and Lily. Nora was left a separate amount because my wife loved her and trusted her, and because she knew Nora would always be near Lily in whatever hard years came. But the will that had actually been filed with the court after my wife died was different. Dominic's share had been reduced to almost nothing. The majority of it had been folded into Lily's portion. "No," I said immediately. "That's impossible. I saw the paperwork." "You saw the swapped version before it was filed," Dominic said. "The attorney handling the estate had a legal assistant on the inside. That assistant was paid to replace the final document before filing." My face got hot. "How much?" $26,000. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. $26,000 to rewrite the wishes of a dying woman. Dominic kept going. Ethan had kept the original as insurance. If anyone ever got suspicious, he would have leverage. If Lily ever turned against him, he would have proof he could use to control the narrative, to shame her, to corner her. I looked at my son. "Does Lily know?" "No." "You sure?" Dominic went quiet for 2 seconds. "I believe she doesn't." That answer hurt more than I wanted to admit. Then he moved on. His case. Not random, not bad luck, not a system malfunction. Engineered. Ethan had an old college friend working at a mid-sized brokerage firm in Charlotte. Together they constructed a network of fake transactions, shell entities, electronic signatures, and then sent an anonymous report exactly where it needed to go. In 6 weeks, suspicion became a federal case. Fast enough that anyone paying attention should have known somebody had opened the door from the inside. "Why?" I asked. "Was it just the money?" Dominic turned to look at me. In that moment, his eyes looked exactly like his mother's when she was trying not to cry in front of the kids. "Not just the money. I was in the way." "In the way of what?" "Marrying Lily, controlling the estate, entering this family without anybody looking too closely." I sat there in silence. Before he proposed to my daughter, my future son-in-law had already laid the groundwork to send my son to prison. I remembered the evening Ethan sat at my kitchen table asking for permission to marry Lily. Hands folded neatly, voice measured, respectful. I had shaken his hand, hard. I thought I was giving my daughter to a man mature enough to deserve her. What I had really done was place my hand inside a trap. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "After you got out, after you got back on your feet, after everything." Dominic looked down at the file on his lap. "Because you would have told Lily." I said nothing, and Lily would have confronted Ethan. Still nothing. And if Ethan had known we were getting close, he would have destroyed evidence, leaned on witnesses, bought time, or disappeared. I breathed out slowly through my nose tasting metal. So you let him sleep in my house? Dominic shook his head. No. I let greed bring him back to the one place he kept the thing he needed most. Then he opened the file and handed me a photograph, an invitation, cream cardstock, gold lettering, 9th anniversary dinner for Ethan and Lily Carter. Saturday, 7 p.m. Maison Elise. Downtown Raleigh. I stared at it, then looked at my son. That's tomorrow, he nodded. You're going to arrest him there. We're going to let him enjoy the appetizer first. I looked back at the house through the windshield. It sat quiet in the pale grey morning. The porch where my wife used to keep ferns now empty. Somewhere inside, the man who had damaged my family more deeply than I had understood was sleeping comfortably. Nora will be there, I said. Dominic nodded again. She's been helping for 5 months. Does Lily know Nora knows? No. I leaned back into the seat. Nora was the kind of woman who spoke little and remembered everything. My wife used to say some people are born knowing how to stand guard over the truth. Nora was one of them. There was another question waiting in me. It had been there since the moment I saw the will through the floorboards. Your mother. I stopped. Did she know something about Ethan? Dominic did not answer immediately. He just looked at me for a long moment, then started the car. Go inside, Dad, he said. Tomorrow night is going to be long. He drove off before I could ask again, and the way he avoided answering told me more than words would have. All day Friday, Ethan behaved as if nothing in the world were wrong. He came downstairs around 8:15 in a robe and asked if there was coffee left. I poured him a cup. My hand was steady. That scared me more than I expected. Busy day, he asked. At my age, the biggest job is remembering to take my pills on time. He laughed, a clean, attractive, harmless-looking laugh. Tomorrow night should be fun, he said, eyes still on his phone. Lily's been planning it for weeks. Good. You're coming, right? I turned and looked at him. I wanted to say, I will be there when your life closes its own lid. But all I did was give him a thin smile. Wouldn't miss it? He looked up. Just for a second. Not even a whole second. But in that instant, I saw the smallest flicker pass behind his eyes. A flash of instinct, the soundless alertness of a predator sensing movement in the grass. Then it was gone. Saturday night I arrived at Maison Elise at 6:45. It was the kind of restaurant where the lighting is always dim enough to make everybody feel more elegant than they really are. Dark wood, crystal glasses, white napkins folded high like sculpture. Servers moving softly enough to seem almost unreal. The reserved table was in the back corner. Lily had done it beautifully. Fresh flowers in the center, handwritten place cards, 8 seats, every detail arranged with care. It was lovely enough to hurt. Nora arrived a few minutes after I did, wearing burgundy, and the expression of a woman who had been carrying a secret too long and was almost ready to set it down. She sat beside me, and, instead of offering one of those useless, comforting phrases people use when they have no idea what to say, she simply rested her hand over mine for a moment. You okay? Ask me again in an hour. She almost smiled. She would hate that it had to happen like this, I said. She would hate that he ever thought he won, Nora replied. I turned and looked at her. She was right. The others arrived gradually. two couples from Ethan's company. Pastor Howard, who had married Ethan and Lily 9 years earlier. A good man. So decent that looking at him that night made me feel embarrassed on behalf of the world. Then Lily came in. My daughter was wearing a dark green dress, her hair pinned low, my wife's pearl necklace at her throat. She laughed at something Ethan said beside her, and for one terrible second she looked so much like her mother that I had to press my fingertips into my palm to stay composed. Ethan walked beside her exactly as he always did. Smooth, charming, self-assured, the sort of man who enters a room and makes the room subtly rearrange itself around him. He greeted everyone, pulled out Lily's chair, topped off wine glasses before the waiter even arrived. He told a story about some recent deal, using that careful tone that sounded modest enough to avoid irritating people while still making sure they admired him. The table laughed in the right places, nodded in the right rhythm. I watched him and thought, this man has been performing for 9 straight years. The appetizers had just arrived when my phone buzzed beneath the table. A text from Dominic. 2 minutes. I turned the phone face down. Beside me, Nora sat a little straighter. No one else noticed. Pastor Howard was reminiscing about the wedding, saying that in all his years officiating ceremonies, he had never seen a calmer groom than Ethan. Calm, of course. Men who believe they have already won are often very calm. Then the front door opened. Dominic walked in. No uniform, just a dark navy suit, white shirt, no tie. But some people carry a kind of authority that does not require a badge. Behind him came a woman in a black blazer and a man in a grey jacket, both with the expression of people who had not come to dine. The room began to change around them. Not all at once. A nearby table quieted first. Then someone turned to look. Then another person did the same. And suddenly the entire restaurant seemed to slow by half a beat. Lily saw Dominic first. "Dom," she said, her face lighting up. "Oh my gosh, you actually came." Then she saw the 2 people behind him. Her voice trailed off. Dominic walked straight toward the table without taking his eyes off Ethan. At that moment, Ethan had his back to the entrance. He must have felt the shift in the room, because he turned slowly, like a man who could not imagine anything in this world important enough to interrupt his dinner. Then he saw Dominic. I had been waiting for that moment ever since I climbed down from the attic. It lasted less than a second, but in that second, Ethan's entire face emptied out. No charm, no polish, no confidence, no control. Only fear, cold, pure, unmistakable fear. It was the first time I had ever seen the real man underneath him. Dominic stopped at the head of the table. His voice was calm enough to be frightening. "Ethan Michael Reeves." The entire table went still. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit financial fraud, obstruction of justice, forgery, and unlawful tampering with a legal instrument." Lily stood up so quickly her chair jerked backward. "What?" she said. "Dominic, what are you doing?" Ethan rose too, faster than I expected. Fast like a man who had always kept several escape scripts prepared in his head. "There has to be some mistake," he said, looking at Dominic and no one else. "This is a private family dinner." Dominic did not blink. "You have the right to remain silent." "Listen," Ethan said, dropping his voice, trying to drag the moment back into the familiar territory of negotiation. If you think you know something, then let's handle this privately. Like adults." Dominic tilted his head very slightly. "I have my mother's original will." The air left the room. I heard somebody suck in a sharp breath at the far end of the table. Dominic continued, voice still level. "I have photographs of you removing it from the floor safe in my father's guest room on Thursday night. I have the testimony of the legal assistant who accepted money to swap the filing. I have financial records linking you to the shell entities used to fabricate the fraud case against me. And I have your college friend in Charlotte, who is now cooperating." Ethan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time in many years, that man had no line ready. The woman in the blazer stepped forward with handcuffs in her hand. Lily turned toward her husband like she was looking at a stranger wearing a familiar face. "Ethan," she said softly. Just his name. But the way she said it hurt so much, I almost wished I had not heard it. Ethan did not look at her first. He looked at me. Only me. Maybe that was the moment he finally understood. Understood why I had still come. Understood why I had been calm. Understood why I had poured his coffee that morning without shaking. I looked back at him and did not smile, did not nod, did not say a word. I let him read everything he deserved to read in my eyes. "You sat at my kitchen table. You drank my bourbon. You slept under my roof. You called me Dad. You sent my son to prison. You stole the wishes of the woman I buried. And you thought the fool in this story was me." The handcuffs clicked shut. It was a small sound, but to me, it was the cleanest sound I had heard in years. Pastor Howard made a strangled little exhale. One of the wives from Ethan's firm shoved her chair back, pale and rigid. The restaurant stayed quiet, that heavy kind of quiet that only happens when people witness someone fall from a very high place onto something hard. Ethan did not resist. Strangely, that made me despise him even more. Even with his hands being cuffed, he was still trying to collect the final scraps of composure, as if performing until the last second had become instinct. Before they led him away, he turned once more toward Lily. My daughter did not look at him. She was staring down at her own hands on the white tablecloth. Then Ethan was gone. The door closed behind him. The world stayed motionless for another few seconds. Then, somewhere in the room, a fork touched a plate. A server shifted weight. Air returned. But none of us at that table were the same people who had walked in an hour earlier. Dominic pulled back Ethan's chair and sat down in it. Then he looked at Lily. "I'm sorry," he said. She lifted her eyes. Dry. That made it hurt more. Some people cry because they break. Some stay dry because they are stitching themselves back together from the inside. "How long?" Lily asked. 8 years to uncover all of it. 6 months to have enough to move. "My mother's will. It was real," Dominic said. "The original will is being restored. Everything is going back to what Mom wanted." Lily sat very still for a few seconds. Then she turned to Nora. There was a glance between them. Brief, quiet, but full of more communication than an hour of speaking could have carried. Then Lily looked at me. "Dad?" Just one word, and her voice broke only on that word. I got up, walked around the table and wrapped my arms around my daughter, the way I used to when she was 7 and afraid of thunderstorms. She gripped my shirt with both hands. trembled once, very slightly. Then steadied. "I'm here," I told her. "I'm always here." She cried exactly once, short, quiet. Then she pulled back, straightened in her chair, dabbed at her face with the napkin, and stared down at the plate in front of her, as if she had just remembered her body still existed. "Is the food good here?" she asked. I blinked. "What? I picked this place and I've never actually eaten here." She inhaled, her voice rough but stronger now. "I want to eat something." I looked at Dominic, then at Nora, then at Pastor Howard, who seemed like a man who had just watched a sermon write itself using real people and real pain. Then I pulled out my chair and sat back down. "Then let's eat," I said. And we did. That probably sounds strange, but it was one of the most human moments of my life. We did not eat like it was a celebration. We ate like people who had just walked out of a fire and realized they were still hungry. Dominic barely touched his food for the first 10 minutes. Nora took a sip of wine and told a small story about freshman year, about how she and Lily once nearly set a dorm kitchen on fire trying to bake my wife a Mother's Day cake. Pastor Howard eventually managed a breath and admitted that in all his years he had never expected to witness a federal arrest between the entree and dessert. Lily laughed, just once. That helped more than I can explain. We did not speak much more about Ethan that night. Instead, we talked about her mother, about how she always arrived 30 minutes early to everything, about how she hated lies, even small ones, about the time she made me drive 3 miles back to a grocery store because a cashier had accidentally given us too much change, about how good she was at reading people, and that was when I finally understood the answer Dominic had never given me in the car. My wife had known, maybe not everything, maybe not enough to prove it, but she had felt it, felt that something in Ethan sat wrong. Maybe that was why she had been so careful with the will. Maybe that was why, in the last months of her life, she kept telling Dominic not to let other people define him. At the time, I thought she was just talking about illness. Now I was no longer sure. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning in early December, I came downstairs to make coffee and found a green folder sitting on the kitchen counter. I recognized my wife's handwriting immediately. Important. I had taken it out of the filing cabinet the night before and placed it there deliberately, so I would be forced to see it first thing in the morning. Inside was the original will, not an old copy, not a photo. The real one, restored, certified, refiled properly. My wife's words, my wife's signature, my wife's intentions finally returned to their rightful voice. Dominic's share had been restored. Lily's portion had been corrected. Nora's gift remained exactly where my wife had wanted it. I rested my hand flat on the folder. Outside, the oak trees stood bare in the early winter cold. The neighborhood was quiet again. Quiet enough that I could hear the coffee brewing in small rhythmic bursts. The house was still the same house, but something inside it had changed. That invisible feeling of violation that had been clinging to the walls for years was gone. I looked over at the stitched sign still hanging near the linen closet. Home is where the heart finds its way back. This time, I looked at it for a long time. "We got him, Ellie," I said into the kitchen. To the sign, to the winter light across the table. To the woman who had always heard wrongness before I did. To the woman who had left too soon, but somehow left behind enough love to keep the rest of us from breaking all the way apart. "Took us a while," I said, "but we got him." The coffee finished brewing. Outside, the first bird of the morning started making noise, that tiny stubborn sound, as if it had something urgent to announce to the day. I poured myself a cup, stood by the window, and took the first sip. And for the first time in 8 years, coffee tasted the way it was supposed to. Not bitterer, not colder, not mixed with the taste of waiting. Just morning coffee in my kitchen, under my roof, after Justice had finally remembered the way back to this house.